Nobody anticipated that Aryna Sabalenka would be under investigation for using unethical methods against Eala. Yes, Sabalenka, the dominant player in women's tennis, is now facing criticism for her performance against the emerging star from the Philippines. One whispered grumble, one instant on the court, and the whole game turned upside down. Fans felt the shockwave reverberate across the arena in addition to sensing anxiousness. Because Sabalenka's actions that evening didn't appear to be typical gamesmanship. Everything seemed staged, even the extended pauses, the subtle movements, and the stare-downs. And the audience recognized there was a serious problem when Eala eventually questioned the chair umpire. Tennis authorities were compelled to intervene as screenshots proliferated and accusations intensified. The question is now straightforward. Did Sabalenka cross a line that she couldn't go back from, or was she just being competitive? Long before the issue erupted, long before screenshots, hashtags, and investigations dominated the timeline, everything started. It starts during the quiet period in between competitions. Area where pressure quietly builds and ambition sharpens, molding both champions and opponents. Aryna Sabalenka has dedicated years to making a fiery and vicious name for herself in the sport. Her ascent was swift, her presence was indisputable, and she was a whirlwind of strength and determination. Her sheer, unadulterated force won her admirers. Her opponents were afraid of her ability to control a match with just a fierce serve and a look. She was the norm, not simply a high seed. However, upheaval is a part of every era. For Sabalenka, it came in the guise of Alexandra Eala, the daring Filipina phenomenon whose ascent felt more like an explosion than a climb. Eala shouldn't have threatened the tour at this early stage. Veterans who had served 10 years in the trenches were not intended to compete with her. However, she managed to do so. The hierarchy appeared to tremble with each step she took into the spotlight. The composure that elite players thought they commanded was further undermined by each upset she produced. Yes, she played with youth, but she also did so in a risky way. Conviction. Genuine, palpable conviction that she was a member of the elite. And even the toughest champions can be shaken by such a mindset. The kind of rumors that start in locker rooms, simmer in press conferences, and burst online started to circulate as Eala's momentum increased. Was she getting up too fast? Was her self-assurance being misinterpreted as conceit? Or was there something else going on? Something more profound? Tension between Sabalenka and Eala didn't start overnight. It started out slowly, with a clipped sentence here and a chilly handshake there. There was enough for supporters to start murmuring, but nothing that anyone could definitely point to. Why does Sabalenka appear agitated whenever Eala's name is mentioned? Is this rivalry personal or genuine? The atmosphere was already tense when the tour arrived at their joint event. A novice refuses to bow, a veteran protecting her domain. Two meteors headed for each other. You might sense the electricity when they eventually cross paths again, even before the purported dirty methods and the purported probe. This wasn't the energy shift that athletes talk about. Beneath their feet, a fault line was developing. With a smile on her face and a positive attitude, Eala walked into the courtroom. With her shoulders squared and her jaw clenched like a warrior entering a well-known conflict, Sabalenka walked with a stone visage. Commentary was not necessary for crowds to comprehend what they were seeing. The plot was revealed by the first few rallies alone. Dominance against hunger, power against accuracy, and intensity against instinct. And Sabalenka felt challenged for the first time in a long time. Not by a Grand Slam champion, not by a top 5 opponent, but by a teenager who has everything to prove and nothing to lose. You could see the fracture developing in those early exchanges, not in their games, but in their dynamic. Something about Eala's poise appeared to arouse in Sabalenka a sense of territoriality and stubbornness that said, "She's not taking my spot." It was just the start. The tension was high enough to cut with a racket even before the match had reached its pivotal moment. This is where everything that transpired later, the contentious gestures, the accusations, the tempest that would pull Sabalenka into a fictitious investigation, started. One court, two players, an impending rivalry. Furthermore, the world was still unaware that this was more than just another contest. It was the spark that would set everything on fire. As soon as the second set started, something changed. Something delicate yet potent enough to change the mood of the entire court. No one could adequately explain it. Not the pundits, not the analysts, not even the spectators in the front rows. But it was palpable to all. Because Sabalenka, who is often a stronghold of intimidation and poise, started acting strangely. The pacing was the first step. Before a serve, Sabalenka extended her routine by bouncing the ball 15, 16, and occasionally 17 times. Eala, the umpire, and fans all took notice. It initially appeared to be nervousness, the kind that can occasionally affect even the most seasoned athletes. Then came the glances, which were timed, crisp, and clearly deliberate. It was not one of Sabalenka's typical competitive stare-downs. No, these targeted Eala's rhythm directly and were colder. Eala stiffened her body language. She slowed her service motion. A young player's self-assurance may be brittle, and Sabalenka appeared to be trying everything. The moment that altered everything then arrived. Eala turned to face the chair umpire midway through a heated rally, not to protest or dispute, but because Sabalenka had made a deep, guttural noise just as Eala was ready to swing. It wasn't your typical grunt. The rally didn't even include it. It seemed to be timed. Eala stopped and stood back up. The whispering began as Sabalenka stood erect at the baseline, her look unreadable. What was that? Did she intentionally do that? Is Sabalenka attempting to interfere with her? One strange incident wouldn't often garner much notice, but this was only the start. Sabalenka again postponed her serve on the very next point, this time by almost 30 seconds rather than just a few seconds. As the audience became agitated, she strolled to her towel, returned to the baseline, and then stopped, staring at Eala. Eala adjusted her weight, not sure if she should wait or reset. More glances of frustration, more whispers. Sabalenka froze in midair, collected the ball, and grinned when she eventually flung it for the serve. Even though it was a small gesture, the slow-motion playback of it ignited social media. Fans began piecing together every moment as if compiling evidence in a case as screenshots of Sabalenka staring down Eala, pausing too long, and interfering with play started to circulate online. Is she employing unethical methods? Why is Sabalenka behaving this way? Eala is deserving of better. When Eala eventually lifted her hand to the umpire, the tension on the court erupted. Not dramatically, not furiously. I'm just exhausted. She was fed up with the interruptions, the delays, and the attempt to act as though she didn't feel the psychological pressure. With a nod, the umpire gave Sabalenka the all-clear to go without pausing. And the crowd, which had been impartial up until now, started to change. Waves of unease followed a few whispers of displeasure. The arena was beginning to feel like a silent storm. Sabalenka's frustration was only getting started. The very competitive and prideful veteran disliked being called out. She tightened her hold on her racket, shrugged her shoulders, and muttered something on stage. She said under her breath that the mics barely caught, but they did catch enough to later spark an explosion. Commentators feigned not to notice, but the crowd recognized something had been uttered when Eala's demeanor slightly changed. The contest ceased to be a match at that point. It turned into a battleground. Every look felt like an impending indictment, every pause felt suspicious, and every point felt heavier. Fans later identified this tight coil of tension as the catalyst, the point at which Sabalenka's actions became dubious, and the time at which Eala found herself against two opponents. The one in her own head and the one on the other side of the internet. The point at which a hypothetical investigation would shortly begin. Because everything got worse from this point on. What transpired outside was nuclear if the tension inside the stadium was explosive. As soon as the match footage appeared on social media, Sabalenka had no control over the story. Everyone had an opinion, including journalists, fans, and past players, and none of them kept it to themselves. Within minutes, what had begun as quiet murmurs in the audience turned into a full-fledged online fury. It started with a single footage in which Sabalenka stopped in the middle of serving, looked at Eala, grinned, and then left to reset. It was simply titled, Mind Games or Dirty Tactics, in a slow-motion repost on X, the former Twitter. The video received more than 500,000 views in just 1 hour. Subsequently, there was a brief interruption in real time as Sabalenka seemed to grunt prior to Eala's swing. But clearly sharp in playback. Fans added subtitles, froze frames, and zoomed in. Each particular detail was added to the increasing amount of evidence. This isn't competitiveness, according to a popular tennis blogger. It's psychological warfare. Another fan commented, Sabalenka would blow up if a younger player did this to her. Even unbiased analysts started to comment by late afternoon. A former professional with a reputation for being cool under pressure tweeted, gamesmanship is part of the sport, but there are limits. One was crossed by this. And the firestorm grew uncontrollable as the pundits added their voices. Minute-by-minute breakdowns were uploaded by reaction channels. It was the most uncomfortable game of the season, according to sports influencers. Filipina supporters united in support of Eala, denouncing what they perceived as a veteran's bullying of a budding star. Timelines were inundated with memes, analogies were made, and stories solidified. The big blow, however, came when Sabalenka's furious mumbling was caught up by a courtside microphone. Although the line was barely audible, it sounded uncomfortably close to an insult. The audio is unquestionably unclear, distorted, and muddy. Online viewers, however, don't wait for clarification. They make the decision. They make judgments. They launch an assault. #StandWithEala started trending in several Asian nations within hours. Another hashtag #InvestigateSabalenka, surfaced. It is fictitious, but tens of thousands of people use it as gospel. Tennis fans started tagging officials, calling for statements, openness, and repercussions. Videos of Eala quietly conversing with the umpire were frequently circulated, presented as evidence of the stress she was under. The burgeoning star's self-control and Sabalenka's growing annoyance were contrasted in side-by-side breakdowns. All of a sudden, the story wasn't about the match. It was a contentious issue. The next morning, the Imaginary Tennis Authority issued a brief, ambiguous statement stating that they were examining the event's video for any possible issues with sportsmanship. Everyone already knew, even though they didn't give Sabalenka's name, mention Eala, or provide specifics. The headline was taken by news outlets. Authorities are examining the Sabalenka-Eala match due to allegations of unsportsmanlike behavior. The public took Sabalenka's camp's silence as an admission of guilt. Her supporters attempted to defend her, but the indignation overwhelmed their reasons. Alexandra Eala, meanwhile, shared a brief statement on social media. Respect is a component of the game. I hope everyone keeps it in mind. Just 8 words. Devastating but calm and in control. The comments section blew up. She handled this with poise. Actions of a queen. A true athlete sounds like this. No one was being attacked by Eala. She wasn't calling for punishment. She wasn't adding fuel to the flames. However, the world interpreted Sabalenka's stillness as something completely different and her silence as a sign of strength. Because the world had already determined what the truth should be, the fictional probe gathered speed rather than because of what Sabalenka did or did not do. Now, the rivalry transcended the court, the game, and the sport. Tension had turned into a worldwide storm. There was no going back now. The sound gradually subsided over the next few weeks, but the effect persisted. Sports scandals come and go, but this hypothetical meeting between Eala's growing fire and Sabalenka's passion made an impression that would not go away with a statement or a shift in headlines. Because some rivalries are created through conflict, miscommunication, and the spaces between ambition and emotion rather than by wins or rankings. When Sabalenka returned to the tour, she had a subtle heaviness in her chest, the kind that comes when a champion has to confront her reflection and doesn't like what she sees. She battled hard and played well, but something had altered inside of her. Not weaker, but more conscious, her edges felt softer. The intimidating look didn't last as long. There were shorter, more orderly pauses in between points. It wasn't an apology. It evolved. Eala, however, did not get up. She took off. The world had witnessed her overcome pressure that would have crushed many seasoned players, not out of compassion or viral videos. Her serenity turned into her power. Her narrative became a source of inspiration for young athletes seeking evidence that grace can prevail in combat, and her poise became her signature. Because of her perseverance rather than her ranking, fans started referring to her as the future. She let the sport speak for her instead of speaking loudly. Nevertheless, their stories seemed interconnected, even predetermined, despite their divergent trajectories. Every place Sabalenka performed, Eala was brought up. Every place Eala played, someone brought up the tight match, the looks, the delays, and the spark that started a worldwide conversation. The competition may have ended, but a hypothetical probe might not. That persisted. The question, will they meet again, and what will it look like this time, started to be asked candidly by journalists. Some envisioned a heated rematch that was intense and under pressure. Others imagined two players acknowledging the storm that molded them both in a moment of reverence at the net. Fans engaged in never-ending argument, picking sides, swapping sides, and crafting new stories. Because that is the nature of rivalries. They do not vanish. They change. They get deeper. However, the techniques, the future, court, the game, and the sport. Tension had turned into a worldwide storm. There was no going back now. The sound gradually subsided over the next few weeks, but the effect persisted. Sports scandals come and go, but this hypothetical meeting between Eala's growing fire and Sabalenka's passion made an impression that would not go away with a statement or a shift in headlines. Because some rivalries are created through conflict, miscommunication, and the spaces between ambition and emotion rather than by wins or rankings. When Sabalenka returned to the tour, she had a subtle heaviness in her chest, the kind that comes when a champion has to confront her reflection and doesn't like what she sees. She battled hard and played well, but something had altered inside of her. Not weaker, but more conscious, her edges felt softer. The intimidating look didn't last as long. There were shorter, more orderly pauses in between points. It wasn't an apology. It evolved. Eala, however, did not get up. She took off. The world had witnessed her overcome pressure that would have crushed many seasoned players, not out of compassion or viral videos. Her serenity turned into her power. Her narrative became a source of inspiration for young athletes seeking evidence that grace can prevail in combat, and her poise became her signature. Because of her perseverance rather than her ranking, fans started referring to her as the future. She let the sport speak for her instead of speaking loudly. Nevertheless, their stories seemed interconnected, even predetermined, despite their divergent trajectories. Every place Sabalenka performed, Eala was brought up. Every place Eala played, someone brought up the tight match, the looks, the delays, and the spark that started a worldwide conversation. The competition may have ended, but a hypothetical probe might not. That persisted. The question, will they meet again, and what will it look like this time, started to be asked candidly by journalists. Some envisioned a heated rematch that was intense and under pressure. Others imagined two players acknowledging the storm that molded them both in a moment of reverence at the net. Fans engaged in never-ending argument, picking sides, swapping sides, and crafting new stories. Because that is the nature of rivalries. They do not vanish. They change. They get deeper. However, the techniques, the inquiry, or even the response may not have been the most stunning aspect of the story. It served as a reminder that athletes are people. Fragile, passionate, imperfect, and bright. That a single instant has the power to either pull people into darkness or into light. And that sometimes the most intense conflicts aren't fought with rackets but rather with ego, perception, and the intense strain of expectations. Above all, one question remained when the dust settled. Was this competition just a passing phase or the start of a new era in women's tennis? Only the court will make the final decision. Tennis is not just for the court, as this narrative has demonstrated. It's also a game of pressure, strategy, and emotions. With her bravery and poise, Eala demonstrated that a true champion is one who retains dignity even under the most trying circumstances. Additionally, Sabalenka's narrative serves as a reminder that ambition and energy can occasionally lead to unanticipated disputes. If you like this video, please hit the bell icon, subscribe, and let us know in the comments what you believe this rivalry portends for the future.